Drones, missiles, chaos. War is changing fast. A Ukrainian designer creates a device to stop deadly FPV drones. New Ukrainian missiles could reach all the way to Siberia. On the ground, 71 brutal clashes in just one day. And back in Russia, gas stations are collapsing under a growing fuel crisis. Welcome to Ukraine. Today I'm Doroslava Kolesnikova, and in this episode we break down the tech, the battles and the chaos shaking both the front lines and the Kremlin. Let's dive in. Ukrainian designer creates device to stop FPV drones. One of the deadliest threats on the front lines today is the enemy's FPV drones, fast, silent and deadly. But a designer from Lviv has stepped up with an invention that could save lives. This new device is built to detect and neutralize incoming drones before they strike. How does it work? Can it protect soldiers in real combat? Full story in our report.
Inside the small device is a special net that shoots out and quickly unfolds in the air. It is capable of blocking a strike drone in flight.
You need to grip the handle with 3 fingers. This finger performs the action when you press the button after removing the safety. You need to look along the axis of the barrel.
This single-use net gun, the Mitla, was created by Artur Shaginyan, a 3D designer from Lviv. After watching numerous interviews with servicemen, he noticed a common problem. Soldiers on the front lines don't always have the means to protect themselves from drones. That's how the idea came about to create a handheld net gun that can be used when a drone is already nearby.
When an FPV drone is already somewhere nearby, they mostly try to position themselves to get a hit. In many situations, for example, when a drone is chasing a car, you can stick the device out the window and shoot down the drone from the car window or the trunk.
The device shoots a net up to 20 meters. It entangles the drone's propellers and disables it. The cost of such a net launcher is about 3,500 trevnias. Arthur assures us this is dozens of times cheaper than foreign counterparts.
There have already been cases of combat use when a drone was chasing a car and it was shot down. A big advantage is that the drone did not detonate during neutralization. Overall, the topic of net launches is quite new. People are still adapting to this, just like it was once with FPV, and it's still not clear how useful it will be.
The work on the development lasted almost a year. Testing is currently underway. Arthur, together with the military, is considering all possible modifications. The fighters are convinced that such an invention will be useful at the front, but they would like greater accuracy and range.
In general, I saw this development on the internet, and it caught my interest. There is a huge threat to our fighters, since they are constantly being pursued by drones. That's why things like this need to be produced. The main thing is that the net should always open. There must be a 100% guarantee. If we're saying that a fighter should use this as a last resort, then he needs to know that there is a 100% guarantee here, not 50, not 60%.
The main advantage of this device is its independence from electronics. Many drones, especially FPV ones, today have protection against electronic warfare or are capable of ignoring such systems. These drones cannot be jammed by standard electronic warfare means. In such cases, physically destroying or stopping the drone is the only solution.
Countermeasures may not be limited to just electronic warfare tools, because there are also drones using fiber optics, or drones that, for example, can lock onto a target from 400 or 500 meters away and then move toward it without any further control from the pilot. So in this case, we can counteract either with pulsed laser weapons or by kinetic destruction, that is, hitting it with another drone or with other systems. We have pump-action shotguns, and there are also net launchers like these.
Analogues of the Mitla net launcher are also used in other armies around the world. For example, the Japanese police use an interceptor drone that releases a net in the air by itself. In the US, there are developments of pneumatic guns that shoot nets from special barrels. However, the Ukrainian versions differ from them in their simplicity, adaptability to real combat, and accessibility. Yulia Belvoda Dmitriev from the Lviv region for Freedom TV channel.
Ukraine develops missiles that can strike deep into Siberia. Kyiv is upgrading its firepower and the new weapons go far beyond ATACMS. Ukraine is now developing long-range missiles capable of hitting targets over 1,000 kilometers away. Meet Lone Neptune, a powerful anti-ship missile with 1,000-kilometer range, and Flamingo, a Ukrainian-made cruise missile that can fly up to 3,000 kilometers, putting even Siberia within reach. Is this the beginning of a new era in Ukrainian defense? All the details in our full report.
Ukraine is using domestically produced weapons to carry out long-range strikes against Russia and does not need to coordinate its targets with the U.S. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated.
Today, to be completely honest with you,
As of today, to be honest, we are using our domestically produced long-range weapons. And lately, to be honest, we haven't been discussing such matters with the U.S. There was a time, you remember, when there were various signals regarding our retaliatory strikes after their Russian attacks on our energy infrastructure.
More powerful and with a longer range than the American ATACMS. For the first time on the 34th anniversary of Ukraine's Independence Day, the official account of the government portal Weapons presented a new version of the R-360 Neptune anti-ship missile. The Ukrainian development, which passed tests back in March of this year and is unofficially called the Long Neptune, exceeds the range of the well-known American ATACMS missile by more than 3 times, reaching a distance of 1,000 kilometers. According to experts' estimates, the length of the updated Neptune is more than 6 meters without the booster, which means it is 1.5 meters longer than the R-360. The central part of the fuselage has also been increased to about 50 centimeters from 38.
we've already used the Long Neptune. Right now, I can't pinpoint the exact location for you, but I know for sure that it was, I won't say in our Kuban, I'll say in the Krasnodar region, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely in the Russian Kuban. At that time, one of the targets was hit, which I believe was connected to the storage of both Russian missiles and Russian Iranian Shaheds that were used to attack Ukraine. There were a few more gifts, including somewhere closer to those locations and by the sea accordingly.
In August of this year, Ukraine unveiled another of its developments, the FP-5 Flamingo cruise missile. The name comes from the fact that the missile's nose cone is painted a bright pink color. The missiles are already in serial production and are being successfully used to strike targets deep inside Russia. Experts note that not only the central regions of the Russian Federation, but also Murmansk and Omsk could fall within the Flamingo's strike zone. The missile has a range of 3,000 kilometers, a speed of 950 kilometers per hour, and a wingspan of 6 meters. The declared warhead of the Flamingo, weighing 1,150 kilograms, is 2.5 times more powerful than the warhead of the American Tomahawk Block V cruise missile, which weighs 450 kilograms, and its range is almost twice as great. As of today, this munition, in terms of its technical characteristics, is the best subsonic cruise missile in the world.
As we can see, the strategic choice of our country, our strategy to focus on missile development and the revival of missile engineering is now yielding results.
Strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities and expanding its own military-industrial complex is a key task for Kyiv and its allies, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
NATO countries are now joining a new program called Pearl. This is a collective tool that allows for increased assistance to Ukraine through the purchase of weapons specifically from the United States of America. European countries have already taken steps within the program, with decisions totaling $1.5 billion.
On August 26, Ukraine reached an agreement with the United Kingdom on cooperation in drone production. This was announced by the country's Minister of Defense Denis Shmyhal. It is known that after Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukraine has significantly increased its production of weapons and the implementation of cutting-edge technologies, which are already being used on the front lines. According to the Ministry of Defense, weapons production volumes have increased 35 times, and the government plans to raise this figure even further. In particular, this refers to drones. Earlier, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine announced that the goal for 2025 is to produce up to 4.5 million drones. Yulia Granovska for Freedom TV channel.
Russia strikes hard, 71 clashes on the front line in one day. The fighting isn't slowing down. Since the beginning of the day, Ukrainian forces have already recorded 71 combat engagements across the front line. According to Ukraine's general staff, the enemy is pushing hardest in the Pokrovsky, Liman and Novopavlivka directions. Heavy shelling, drone attacks and assault attempts continue. What's happening right now on the ground and how are Ukrainian troops holding the line? Full frontline update in our report.
The situation in the border areas of Sumy and Kharkiv regions is under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. At a meeting of the staff, President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the soldiers for their resilience and discussed the key needs of each direction and unit.
It is very important that the nature of the situation in the border areas of the Sumy and Kharkiv regions is determined by our units. I would especially like to mention the 225th Assault Regiment, the 71st Separate Jaeger Brigade, and our Special Operations Forces units. Thank you. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, Facebook.
The soldiers report that they are destroying all the small Russian infantry groups that their commanders throw into so-called meat assaults, unsuccessfully trying to break through the Ukrainian defense. The defenders emphasize that every time the enemy fails their physical training test spectacularly, or more precisely, with an explosion.
In other words, their current approach is, well, if this soldier is killed, they'll just send a new one. In fact, many of them don't even have the objective of engaging in combat, so to speak, or breaking through our barriers or capturing our strong points. For many, the task is simply to advance as far as possible, take up a position, and wait for someone else to arrive.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in the Kramatorsk direction, Ukrainian soldiers repelled 2 Russian attacks, and 4 each in the Siversk and southern Slobozansky directions, as well as 5 each in the northern Slobozansky, Kursk, Kupiansk, and Toretsk sectors of the front. According to the soldiers, all the Russian equipment that the enemy tries to bring in for their attacks quickly turns into scrap metal. The defenders also spoke about another daring operation in the city of Toretsk. There, the building of an old swimming pool was destroyed. This is a strategically important facility that could have ended up under the control of the Russian occupiers. To plant the explosives, the sappers, under the cover of armored vehicles, went right up to the front line. The operation was extremely complex and risky.
The weather was on our side from the start. There was such a thick fog that it actually lifted our spirits, and we were confident that everything would work out for us. We went in and thoroughly inspected the premises, even went down into the basements. After all, we understood that we couldn't let the enemy in there, because then they would have a very secure foothold to consolidate and build up their forces. And the result was unexpectedly spectacular.
The enemy tried to attack 9 times in the Novopavlivka direction. There, our soldiers repelled Russian assaults near 4 settlements. Another 17 attacks by Russian occupiers were repelled in the Lyman sector. The situation remains difficult in the Pokrovsk direction. There, 24 unsuccessful attempts by the Russians to push Ukrainian defenders from their positions were thwarted.
So if you look at it, the whole front is on fire, it's burning. But the distinctive feature is that the defense forces are shifting to a tactic of active defense. This is extremely important because whoever holds the initiative controls the battlefield. Seizing the initiative from the enemy is now, in general, the main task of the armed forces of Ukraine, the Ukrainian defense forces.
A single precise strike by Ukrainian soldiers deprived the Russians of a T-80 tank, which they had hidden in a forest belt, planning to use it for a possible breakthrough. Another target was destroyed in the Lyman direction. There, a Ukrainian FPV drone flew through a long forested area and struck a Zu-23 with precision. This is a Soviet anti-aircraft gun that the occupiers used to engage aerial targets at low altitudes. And on the Zaporizhzhia section of the front, the Russians lost an engineering remote mining system called Zemledeli, which was spectacularly blown up by operators from Ukraine's unmanned systems forces.
A skilled FPV crew is all it takes. A single FPV crew can stop a mechanized infantry assault using vehicles. That's the importance of unmanned systems units for you.
Russia faces fuel crisis, gas stations in chaos. Fuel is running dry across Russia. Long lines, empty pumps and growing panic at gas stations signal a deep increases. The official reason, unscheduled repairs at oil refineries. But the real cause, carefully hidden by Kremlin propaganda, may be far more damaging. What's behind the sudden collapse of Russia's fuel supply and how bad could it get? Full story in our report.
Gasoline shortage in the country, gas stations, Russia. The official explanation for the shortage is unscheduled maintenance at oil refineries. Russian propaganda is hiding the real reason.
The line on Melniknaya Street, right on the road. Oh my goodness.
The fuel shortage is felt most acutely in Zabaikalsky Krai, Primorsky Krai, and the temporarily occupied Crimea.
As I see it, there are two distinct and significant reasons for this current fuel shortage. The first, and perhaps most widely discussed, is what everyone is talking about, that some crucial Russian oil refineries were unfortunately hit, and this, let's say, consequently created a physical shortage of fuel, which is inevitably leading to its scarcity.
Since the beginning of August, Ukrainian drones have attacked Russian oil refining infrastructure. In less than 3 weeks, at least 7 of the largest refineries were affected, and they had to completely halt production. The first to be hit were the Ryazan and Novokubishevsk oil refineries. Look, did you get that on camera just now? Wow. Unbelievable. 5 days later, the Afipsky refinery came under attack.
A drone just hit the plant.
On August 14th, one of the largest industry plants in Russia, the Volgograd refinery, shut down. The next day, UAVs struck the Syzran oil refinery.
Drones are flying, yeah. Drones are flying.
There's no internet. The plant is on fire. And on Samara News, we're watching some kind of loading report. The last one on the night of August 24th was the Novoshakhtinsk refinery, which was hit.
I think there's a second reason, one that no one talks about publicly. But based on the experience of a similar situation in Russia, which happened in September 2023, it's quite possible that this is the case. This is the cancellation of the damper. Back then in 2023, the Russian authorities, aiming to optimize budget spending, decided to cut damper payments. The damper is a subsidy paid to fuel distributors for selling fuel domestically at relatively low prices.
Since the beginning of summer, wholesale prices for A95 gasoline on the Russian exchange have risen by 35%, and since the start of the year, by more than 50%. A92 has increased by 40%. Even with these high gasoline prices, there still isn't enough for everyone. People complain that fuel can only be purchased with vouchers intended for businesses and special equipment.
In Russia, the goal is to cut expenses as much as possible. The main reason for these expenses is the full-scale war against Ukraine. But Russia does not want to stop the war, so it seems to me that the decision was made to cut damper payments. Moreover, a meeting on optimizing damper payments is scheduled for early September in Russia. But most likely they decided to cut these payments even before that meeting. And as shown in September 2023, when damper payments are cut, the businesses involved in fuel sales simply hold back the fuel and don't allow it to be sold, since it would either be at a loss or the margin would not be as high as it could be.
Journalists report that the self-proclaimed head of Crimea, Sergei Aksionov, admitted on a local TV channel that there are fuel problems on the peninsula and predicted that there will be a gasoline shortage for another month. The sale of AI-92 gasoline has also been suspended for residents of the Kuril district, which is part of the Sakhalin region, because the entire supply there is needed for special vehicles. The gasoline situation could be resolved by Putin's friend, the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko. However, he is in no hurry to do so.
In 2019, Russia decided to implement a tax maneuver. What did it involve? It meant that instead of an export tax on oil, a tax on oil extraction was introduced. Why is this important in the context of Belarus? Because Russia and Belarus are allied states, and according to their agreement, the oil export tax that Russia collected in relation to other countries, or rather in this context, in relation to Belarus, went into the budget of the Republic of Belarus. In other words, Belarus didn't pay anything. But the mineral extraction tax did not go into the revenue of the Republic of Belarus. This was done for one simple reason, because Russia understood that Belarus was making money by taking raw materials from it and producing petroleum products from that oil. And for 5 years, starting in 2019 and finishing in 2024, they spent time trying to minimize as much as possible the amount of fuel produced in Belarus.
In essence, Russia ended up suffering from exactly what it was fighting against. With his stubbornness, Putin continues to drive the country deeper into a pit of shortages and high prices. And the victims of his actions are ordinary people.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you found this episode powerful, like, comment and subscribe to stay updated. And most importantly, become a sponsor. Your support keeps independent Ukrainian journalism alive and fearless. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.